Today's video is a detailed review and analysis of the movie King Kong 2005, starring Naomi Watts. This is not a full movie and not a movie screening. In this video, we will break down the complete story of the film and explain how the plot develops from start to end. We will talk about the main cast and supporting cast, their roles, and their performances. We will also cover the movie's production, development process, and the creative choices behind it. You will learn where the story was inspired from, who wrote it, and what the original idea and purpose were. Along with the creative side, we will analyze the movie's budget, box office performance, and overall business results. Every important element of the film is explained and reviewed from a viewer's perspective. So let's begin and take a closer look at King Kong. The year is 1933, and New York breathes in exhaustion, hope mixed with hunger, streets echoing with dreams that refuse to die. Anne Darrow walks those streets every day, a performer with talent, dignity, and empty pockets chasing the next chance. In this city of survival, art is fragile, ambition is dangerous, and desperation becomes the fuel for impossible journeys. Carl Denham enters like a storm, loud, confident, reckless, a filmmaker drowning in debt but drunk on vision. He doesn't see Anne as a person first. He sees a face, a symbol, something that can sell a dream. Yet behind his smile is fear, and behind every promise is a gamble he is willing to lose others on. Anne hesitates, not because she lacks courage, but because she has learned the cost of blind faith. Her decision changes when she hears a name that matters to her soul. The writer, Jack Driscoll. Words matter to Anne, stories matter, and this promise feels like more than survival, it feels like purpose. The ship Venture waits at the dock, old, tired, but still capable of crossing unknown waters. Captain Inglehorn commands it with discipline, already sensing trouble clinging to Denham's plans. Secrets hide beneath Denham's cheerful lies, especially the destination he refuses to reveal. Jack Driscoll boards unaware, trapped by Denham's manipulation, and delayed just long enough to seal his fate. Jack believes stories should respect truth, a belief that will be tested against monsters and men alike. Between him and Anne, something quiet begins, a bond built on shared ideals rather than spectacle. As the Venture leaves civilization behind, the ocean becomes a mirror for what lies ahead. Dreams expand with the horizon, while danger waits patiently beyond the fog. No one on board truly understands that history is already turning against them. At night, Anne performs small routines for the crew, laughter cutting through tension and fear. Kong is not yet a name spoken aloud, but fate is already listening. Every step forward pulls them closer to an island that does not forgive trespassers. The ship continues its journey as tension quietly grows among the crew members. Fog surrounds the ocean, creating an eerie silence that feels deeply unsettling. Carl hides his true destination, while suspicion spreads across the deck, slowly. Anne and Jack spend more time together, sharing thoughts during quiet moments. Their conversations reveal hope, fear, and dreams beyond the struggling city. A soft connection forms, unnoticed by others, but emotionally very strong. Captain Inglehorn begins sensing danger as strange signs appear during travel. Crew members whisper rumors about Skull Island and its terrifying legends. Carl ignores warnings, obsessed with capturing something extraordinary on film. A sudden radio message shocks the captain with news of Carl's arrest warrant. Authorities demand the ship change course, immediately toward Rangoon. Carl panics but insists they continue forward, risking everyone's safety. Thick fog consumes the ship as visibility drops to almost nothing. Moments later, the vessel crashes into unseen land with violent force. They have arrived at the mysterious and forbidden Skull Island. Dark jungle surrounds them, filled with unfamiliar sounds and ancient fear. Carl convinces a small group to explore, despite growing unease. Anne stays behind initially, sensing something deeply wrong with the place. Native drums echo suddenly, as masked islanders emerge aggressively. Chaos erupts when the natives attack, killing crew members instantly. Anne is abducted during the confusion, dragged into the darkness. The crew escapes barely alive, realizing Anne is missing too late. Guilt and fear spread as they prepare a rescue mission immediately. No one yet understands what kind of terror rules this island. Anne is presented before a massive wooden wall, covered in carvings. The natives prepare her as a sacrifice, chanting in terrifying rhythm. Chains are placed as the ground begins shaking violently beneath them. A colossal shadow appears as Kang emerges from behind the wall. His size and presence freeze everyone in absolute fear. Anne stares helplessly as Kang lifts her effortlessly away. Back at the ship, Jack realizes Anne has been taken by something monstrous. A rescue team is formed, driven by duty, guilt, and desperation. Carl secretly sees opportunity, imagining the ultimate cinematic discovery. The team enters the jungle, surrounded by massive prehistoric creatures. Suddenly, dinosaurs charge, triggering a deadly stampede through the valley. Men are crushed and lost as survival becomes pure chaos. Anne begins calming Kong using her vaudeville performance skills. Her humor and expressions slowly intrigue the giant beast. A strange bond starts forming between Beauty and the beast. Kong protects Anne from vicious dinosaurs in a brutal battle. His raw power contrasts with moments of surprising gentleness. Anne sees intelligence and emotion behind his terrifying appearance. Meanwhile, the rescue party faces horrifying creatures within a deep ravine. Giant insects attack, killing nearly everyone trapped below. Only a few escape, shaken and mentally broken. Jack continues alone, driven by love and determination. He tracks Kong's lair across dangerous cliffs and terrain. Every step pushes him closer to death or reunion. Jack reaches Anne and awakens Kong accidentally during escape. The crew ambushes Kong using gas bombs to knock him unconscious. Anne begs them to stop, but greed overpowers compassion. Kong is chained and transported away from his island home. The jungle watches silently as its king is taken. Anne's face reflects guilt, sorrow, and emotional conflict. The ship reaches New York as winter lights glow across the busy streets. Crowds gather, unaware that something unimaginable has arrived with the cargo. Carl smiles proudly, believing history is about to be rewritten forever. Kong is chained inside a massive theater, displayed as a living spectacle. Bright lights flash as Carl introduces the eighth wonder of the world. Anne refuses to participate, disturbed by Kong's humiliation and suffering. A substitute actress replaces Anne, wearing a cheap costume and forced smile. Camera flashes terrify Kang, confusing him with sudden blinding light. His fear quickly turns into rage as chains begin snapping violently. Kang breaks free, destroying the stage and sending crowds into panic. People scream as the theater collapses under his immense strength. Carl watches helplessly as control completely slips from his grasp. Kong escapes into the snowy streets, towering above buildings and traffic. Cars crash and people scatter as chaos spreads across the city. Military forces are alerted as the situation escalates rapidly. Kong searches desperately for an among unfamiliar streets and noise. He lifts people gently, confused by their fear and resistance. His loneliness becomes painfully visible, despite the destruction. Anne reunites with Kang briefly, calming him with her presence. Their connection remains strong despite everything that has happened. She pleads silently for his safety. As danger closes in, Jack follows Kong through the city, risking his life repeatedly. His concern is focused only on Anne's survival and escape. The city becomes a battlefield between fear and misunderstanding. Military planes surround Kong as he climbs the Empire State Building. Snow falls as Kong reaches the highest point, holding Anne carefully. The moment feels tragic, beautiful, and painfully inevitable. Biplanes attack, circling Kong with roaring engines and gunfire. Kong fights back bravely, swatting planes from the sky. Each victory costs him strength and brings him closer to death. Anne screams for them to stop as bullets tear into Kong's body. His grip weakens as he looks at Anne one final time. Love and loss mix within his fading eyes. Kong collapses, falling from the tower toward the frozen street below. The city watches in silence as his massive body crashes down. A legend ends, leaving shock and sadness behind. Jack reaches Anne, holding her as grief overwhelms them both. Crowds gather around Kong's lifeless form in stunned silence. Even the soldiers lower their weapons, sensing something lost forever. Carl steps forward, staring at the fallen giant with regret. Someone says the airplanes killed the beast without emotion. Carl responds quietly, blaming Beauty for Kong's tragic fate. Snow continues falling as the city slowly returns to normal. But something has changed within everyone who witnessed the event. Kong becomes a symbol of misunderstood greatness and loss. Anne looks back one final time before leaving the scene. Her expression carries guilt, love, and unspoken sorrow. The memory of Kong will haunt her forever. Jack leads in a way, promising safety and a new beginning. Behind them, Kong's body is covered and taken away. The world moves on, but the legend never dies. The city slowly heals as days pass after Kong's tragic fall. Newspapers headline the event, debating blame and responsibility. Public opinion splits between fear, awe, and deep regret. Carl Denham disappears from public view, his dreams shattered. The fame he chased now feels hollow and poisonous. Guilt follows him louder than applause ever did. Anne Darrow withdraws from the spotlight completely. She refuses interviews, choosing silence over fame. Her memories of Kang remain painfully vivid. Jack Driscoll stays close to an offering steady comfort. Their bond strengthens through shared trauma, and understanding words feel unnecessary between them now. Authorities investigate the Skull Island expedition quietly. Reports are sealed, labeled too disturbing for public release. The truth becomes buried beneath official statements. The remaining crew members try returning to normal lives. Nightmares haunt them, filled with jungle shadows and roars. Skull Island never truly leaves their minds. Scientists debate Kong's existence in academic circles. Some claim he was a myth, exaggerated by fear. Others believe humanity destroyed something irreplaceable. Merchandise briefly floods the market using Kong's image. Public backlash forces companies to pull products quickly. Respect replaces exploitation. At least for a time, Anne begins performing again, but with a changed spirit. Her comedy routines carry deeper emotion and restraint. Audiences sense something profound behind her smiles. Jack completes his screenplay inspired by the journey. It becomes a story about greed, beauty, and loss. Producers hesitate, fearing controversy and truth. Carl reads the script in private, recognizing himself within it. He sees the monster was never Kong. The realization arrives far too late. Memorials quietly appear honoring Kong's sacrifice. No official monument is ever approved by the city, yet people leave flowers where he fell. Children ask parents about the giant ape. From stories, parents struggle, explaining fear without hatred. Kong becomes a legend, passed through whispers. Anne visits the Empire State Building alone one evening. She watches the city lights flicker below, tears fall silently into the cold wind. Jack joins her, standing without speaking for a long time. They acknowledge the past without reopening wounds. Healing finally begins between them. Skull Island remains uncharted on modern maps. Sailors avoid its waters out of superstition. Nature guards its secrets fiercely. Rumors spread of creatures still alive there. Some believe Kong was only the last survivor. Others fear waking what should sleep forever. Anne dreams of Kong often, but the dreams soften. He appears peaceful, no longer afraid. She wakes with sadness, yet also acceptance. Time moves forward as history absorbs the event. The world forgets details, but remembers emotion. Legends survive where facts fade. Jack and Anne leave New York for a quieter life. They seek distance from crowds and expectations. Peace becomes their greatest ambition. Carl's final words echo through cinema history. Beauty and the Beast become eternal symbols. The lesson lingers long after the spectacle ends. Kong's story transforms into caution and myth. Human ambition stands exposed, and small nature's power demands respect, not chains. The world continues, unchanged, yet deeply altered. Some losses reshape humanity silently. Kong's legacy lives within that silence. New York becomes a cage once Kong arrives, dressed as spectacle instead of legend. Denham's obsession finally finds applause, yet the applause sounds hollow and cruel. Chains replace curiosity, and wonder is sold as a ticketed illusion for crowds. The Broadway reveal treats Kong like a prop, stripping meaning from his wild presence. Lights flash violently, cameras scream, and humanity shows its ugliest hunger. Anne's absence fractures Kong's fragile trust, turning confusion into unstoppable rage. His escape is not villainy but instinct, a wounded creature searching familiar kindness. Concrete streets replace jungles, noise replaces wind, fear replaces reverence. The city becomes a maze where power and vulnerability collide violently. Kong's rampage exposes human arrogance more than monstrous destruction. Military responses arrive instantly, unable to see tragedy within chaos. Civilization proves smaller than the beast it fears, measured by panic and firepower. Anne and Kong reunite briefly, tenderness surviving amid collapsing buildings and sirens. Their connection feels painfully out of place within steel and smoke. This contrast highlights how unnatural captivity truly was from the beginning. The Empire State Building rises like a final altar to misplaced ambition. Kong climbs not in triumph, but desperation, seeking safety above violence. Height becomes sanctuary, until humanity again chooses domination over understanding. Airplanes circle like predators, symbolizing technological cruelty against ancient innocence. Kong fights bravely, defending Anne despite impossible odds. Each fallen plane delays the inevitable, emphasizing sacrifice rather than victory. His death feels slow, heavy, and mournful rather than heroic spectacle. Gravity claims him as bullets weaken his grip on the world. Silence replaces gunfire, forcing witnesses to confront their own brutality. Denham's famous line rings hollow yet revealing, blaming beauty instead of greed. Responsibility shifts conveniently away from human exploitation and obsession. The film invites viewers to question who the real monster truly was. Anne's grief feels quiet, personal, and unresolved, mirroring audience emotions. Jack's presence offers comfort, but cannot erase guilt. Loss lingers heavier than any triumphant conclusion ever could. King Kong's ending refuses easy catharsis, embracing sorrow instead. The spectacle fades, leaving reflection in its wake. Beauty, power, and innocence collapse under mankind's relentless control. Peter Jackson frames Kong not as beast, but tragic mirror. Human ambition reflects back through towering fur and wounded eyes. The monster exists because humanity demanded one. This part of the film redefines action as emotional consequence. Destruction carries weight rather than empty excitement. Every crash echoes with moral failure. Visual effects serve story rather than replacing it here. Kong's expressions communicate fear, loyalty, and heartbreak convincingly. Technology enhances tragedy instead of masking it. The New York sequence contrasts sharply with Skull Island's raw freedom. Urban order feels sterile, oppressive, and violently indifferent. Nature's mystery suffocates under artificial spectacle. Audience sympathy shifts fully toward Kang by the conclusion. Humans become antagonists through choices rather than appearance. Perspective flips subtly, making reflection unavoidable. King Kong's death finalizes the film's emotional thesis. Unchecked ambition destroys what it cannot understand. Wonder dies when ownership replaces respect. This section cements the film's legacy beyond monster cinema. It transforms pulp adventure into mournful fable. Action gives way to meaning. Spectacle bows to consequence. The fifth part carries the film's heaviest emotional burden. It challenges viewers instead of comforting them. Entertainment evolves into cautionary tale. Kong's final moments redefine strength as vulnerability. True power lies in empathy, not domination. The fall becomes unforgettable because it feels earned. By ending in tragedy, the story remains honest. No victory feels justified. No loss feels accidental. Humanity stands exposed, small beneath its own skyline. After Kong's fall, the city does not celebrate victory or survival. People stand frozen, staring at the body they helped destroy. Silence replaces screams, forcing reflection instead of relief. Police lights wash over the scene without restoring moral order. Soldiers lower weapons, suddenly unsure why they were raised. Power feels meaningless beside irreversible loss. Anne remains distant from the crowd, grief isolating her completely. She witnessed gentleness crushed by misunderstanding and greed. Her tears carry more truth than any official explanation offered. Jack's presence brings quiet grounding rather than romantic closure. Their bond survives trauma, but feels permanently altered. Love exists, yet innocence is gone forever. Denham slips away into the crowd, burdened but unchanged. Regret touches him briefly before obsession moves elsewhere. He escapes accountability just as easily as he escaped responsibility. The city resumes motion quickly, refusing prolonged introspection. Life continues above broken streets and forgotten truths. Kang becomes another headline instead of a lesson. Newspapers frame the event as spectacle, not tragedy. Language reshapes violence into entertainment once again. Public memory shortens conveniently, protecting comfort over conscience. Anne's silence becomes her quiet resistance against exploitation. She refuses interviews, refusing to let Kang be rewritten. Memory becomes her final act of loyalty. Jack recognizes the story's deeper cost beyond survival. Words fail to capture loss shaped by human arrogance. Sometimes silence tells stories better than scripts ever could. Skull Island lingers like a ghost throughout the aftermath. Its mystery contrasts sharply with urban certainty and control. Freedom feels distant, remembered rather than accessible. The island's creatures remain untouched by civilization's hunger. Their survival feels fragile, threatened by inevitable discovery. The cycle seems destined to repeat under different names. The film's final moments shift focus from monster to mankind. Reflection replaces adventure as the lasting emotional tone. The audience leaves unsettled rather than satisfied. Kong's legacy transforms from terror into tragedy. His strength now symbolizes vulnerability rather than threat. Meaning emerges only after irreversible destruction. Peter Jackson allows discomfort to linger intentionally. The ending refuses redemption or clear moral victory. Responsibility rests uncomfortably on human shoulders. This part reframes the entire journey retrospectively. Every earlier choice gains heavier significance. Adventure dissolves into cautionary memory. The spectacle fades, leaving emotional residue behind. Action scenes lose glamour. Once consequences surface, reflection becomes unavoidable, even unwelcome. Kong's story mirrors countless real-world exploitations, Nature commodified, conquered, then mourned too late. Cinema becomes mirror rather than escape. Anne's experience stands as emotional core of the narrative. She bridges worlds that should never have collided. Her grief humanizes what society dehumanized. Jack's role emphasizes witness rather than heroism. Survival does not equal victory within this story. Sometimes living means carrying guilt forward. The absence of triumphant music reinforces thematic weight. Sound design respects silence, where celebration would betray truth. Restraint strengthens emotional honesty. The film concludes by challenging audience complicity. Spectacle attracts, yet reflection must follow. Viewers are invited to question what they enjoy watching. King Kong's final act elevates the genre entirely. Monster cinema evolves into moral parable. Entertainment transforms into ethical inquiry. Legacy matters more than spectacle by the conclusion. What remains remembered defines meaning. Kang endures not as beast, but as warning. This part completes the emotional arc quietly. Resolution arrives through understanding, not closure. The city skyline stands unchanged, indifferent to lessons learned. Buildings outlast empathy, reinforcing thematic irony. Progress advances while wisdom lags behind. Kong's story ends, yet its implications continue. Human ambition remains unchecked beyond the frame. The tragedy feels disturbingly unfinished. Audience departure mirrors characters' emotional displacement. Questions linger rather than answers. That discomfort defines the film's power. Memory replaces spectacle as lasting takeaway. Silence becomes the loudest ending possible. The island breathes like something alive. Thick air pressing against every silent step forward. Drums echo faintly through fog, not loud, but steady, like a warning heartbeat. Men exchange uneasy glances, sensing they are no longer explorers but intruders. Carl watches the jungle with hungry eyes, already imagining frames and fame. Jack feels something darker, a presence that does not need to be seen. Anne shivers, sensing she is being watched long before she understands why. The natives appear suddenly, painted faces frozen in ritualistic fury. Spears fly, screams cut through mist, chaos replacing careful curiosity instantly. Gunfire scares them off, but the jungle does not release its grip. They retreat, toward the ship, breathless, wounded, shaken by unseen judgment. Relief comes briefly, like sunlight before a storm closes again. Anne pauses, confused by a strange silence behind her. Hands pull her into darkness before anyone can scream her name. Drums rise instantly, louder now, demanding obedience to ancient law. She is bound, lifted, carried like an offering already accepted. High walls loom, carved with symbols older than language. The villagers chant as firelight dances across monstrous stone doors. Anne struggles, fear mixing with disbelief at her helplessness. The name Kang is whispered with reverence. Fear, devotion, intertwined. Chains rattle as enormous gates slowly separate with thunderous weight. The ground vibrates, warning her body before her eyes understand. A massive shadow moves beyond the opening, breathing deep and slow. Every step shakes stone, sending dust raining from ancient structures. Anne freezes, caught between instinct and awe. Kong emerges fully, towering, scarred, eyes burning with ancient loneliness. He roars, sound ripping through jungle, silencing every living thing. Anne collapses, terror overwhelming thought, breath stolen by magnitude. Kang approaches, curiosity overpowering aggression for the briefest moment. He lifts her gently, confused by her softness and trembling heartbeat. The villagers bow, ritual complete, fate sealed without mercy. From afar, Jack hears the roar and knows Anne is lost. Men argue whether rescue is possible or already meaningless. Carl hears opportunity instead, mind racing faster than fear. They return to shore, organizing weapons and desperate courage. No one speaks Kong's name aloud, but everyone feels it. The jungle watches them prepare, patient and Meanwhile, Kong carries in deeper, moving like a living mountain. She screams until her voice breaks, then only breath remains. He studies her expressions, puzzled by emotion he barely remembers. In his lair, ancient bones tell stories of endless survival. Anne realizes he is not merely a beast, but alone. Fear softens into fragile awareness she does not yet trust. Kong protects her from creatures far worse than himself. Dinosaurs attack, teeth and claws flashing through chaotic violence. Kong fights savagely, rage born from instinct and possession. Anne watches destruction unfold, understanding she survives by his will. Blood and thunder surround them, but Kang never harms her. Between battles, silence returns, heavy and intimate. She performs, trembling but brave, using humor and movement. Kang tilts his head, intrigued by something unfamiliar. For the first time, Anne sees wonder replace fury. Back in the jungle, rescue teams stumble into nightmare. Monstrous creatures hunt them without warning or mercy. Men fall, screaming, swallowed by earth and darkness. Jack pushes forward, driven by love and stubborn hope. Carl follows, still chasing vision rather than life. The jungle claims most of them without apology. Jack finally sees Kong from a distance, awe freezing him. Anne looks small in Kong's massive grasp, yet unharmed. Hope surges painfully, mixed with helpless fear. Carl's mind shifts instantly from rescue to capture. He sees chains, stages, applause, not consequences. The plan forms quietly, dangerously, without conscience. Gas, ropes. Preparation begins as desperation becomes strategy. Anne senses betrayal before she understands its shape. Kong senses danger too, roaring in warning. The jungle erupts again as Kong is attacked. He fights valiantly, but stumbles, overwhelmed, confused. Anne screams as he collapses, betrayed by human ambition. Silence falls unnaturally as Kong lies unconscious. Chains wrap around him, heavier than any wound. Anne weeps, realizing safety has shifted into tragedy. The island watches them leave, unmoved, ancient and eternal. Kong is taken from his world, stolen like a trophy. The ocean carries them away toward irreversible fate. The ocean stretches endlessly as the ship cuts forward with stolen cargo. Kong lies restrained, breathing heavy, chest rising like a chained mountain. Anne stays close, guilt weighing heavier than fear inside her chest. The crew avoids his eyes, unsettled by his quiet suffering. Carl watches proudly, convinced he has conquered destiny itself. Jack watches silently, knowing something sacred has been violated. Storm clouds gather as if nature itself objects. Thunder rolls, echoing Kong's distant restrained groan. Anne reaches out, whispering apologies he cannot understand. Kang stirs slightly, sensing her presence despite captivity. His massive eye opens briefly, reflecting confusion and pain. She flinches, realizing he trusted her. The journey feels endless, tension growing with each passing mile. Men argue quietly about profit, danger, and regret. Carl hears only applause already echoing in his mind. Land finally appears, foreign and cold to Kong's instincts. New York rises, sharp and unnatural against the horizon. Kong senses the change instantly, body tensing against chains. Crowds gather as the ship docks, unaware of what arrives. Crates are moved, orders shouted, excitement replacing caution. Anne stays silent, knowing nothing good can follow. Kang is transported under heavy guard, through sleeping streets. Buildings tower like cliffs made of stone and steel. His breathing grows erratic, overwhelmed by unnatural confinement. Carl prepares the spectacle with obsessive precision. Lights, chains, banners, promises of wonder flood the theater. He names Kang proudly, reducing a living being to attraction. Anne refuses the stage, unable to face betrayal publicly. Another woman is placed where Anne once stood. Kong senses the absence instantly. Agitation building. Flashbulbs explode like gunfire in his vision. Crowds cheer, laugh, point, unaware of rising danger. Kong roars, chains rattling under emotional strain. He searches desperately for Anne among strangers. Her scent, her presence, nowhere to be found. Confusion turns into rage fueled by humiliation. Chains snap under unstoppable strength and wounded pride. The stage collapses as Kong breaks free. Screams replace applause instantly. Kang bursts into the city, chaos erupting behind him. Cars scatter, glass shatters, fear spreads like wildfire. He searches relentlessly, driven by memory alone. Jack races through streets, heart pounding with desperate hope. Anne hears the roar and knows exactly what it means. Their paths collide amid destruction and disbelief. Kong finds Anne, relief flooding his expression briefly. He lifts her gently, protecting her from panicked crowds. Soldiers mobilize, weapons ready, misunderstanding fear as threat. Bullets strike Kong's flesh, anger igniting instantly. He fights back, not to conquer, but to escape. Anne clings tightly, begging him to stop. Kong climbs higher, instincts guiding him upward. Steel beams bend beneath his weight. The city shrinks below them, insignificant and hostile. The Empire State Building rises like a final refuge. Wind howls as Kang ascends, carrying Anne carefully. For a moment, peace settles between them. Anne looks into Kong's eyes, seeing sadness, not rage. Kong touches her softly, understanding something must end. The city prepares its final answer. Engines roar as planes approach like insects of death. Kang roars back, defiant against impossible odds. The battle begins above the clouds. He swats planes from the sky, refusing surrender. Gunfire tears into him, blood marking the stone. Anne screams, helpless, heartbreaking with every strike. Kong weakens, strength fading despite relentless courage. He looks at Anne one final time. Understanding passes between them without words. His grip loosens as life slips away. Kong falls, massive body crashing toward streets below. Silence follows devastation. Anne collapses, sobbing, held by Jack. Crowds gather, stunned by consequence. Carl arrives, watching ruin replace glory. He speaks softly, realizing too late what was lost. Kong lies still, conquered not by bullets alone. The city breathes again, changed forever. Smoke lingers over the streets, where Kong's body lies still. People stand frozen, unsure whether to mourn or celebrate. Anne cannot look away, heart shattered beyond repair. Jack keeps her close, shielding her from cruel stares. Soldiers lower their weapons, victory feeling strangely hollow. Carl watches silently, applause replaced by unbearable guilt. Authorities secure the area, treating Kong like evidence. Chains return, meaningless against his lifeless form. The crowd slowly disperses, whispers filling the cold air. Anne steps forward, despite Jack's hesitation. She places her hand on Kong's fur one last time. There is no warmth left, only memory. Flashbacks flood her mind without mercy. Skull Island, laughter, protection, quiet understanding. She realizes Kong never belonged to any world here. Carl turns away, unable to face what he caused. His dream now feels monstrous and unforgivable. Jack watches him, anger restrained by grief. News headlines spread the story across the city. Some call Kang a monster, others call him a tragedy. No one truly understands what was lost. Anne retreats from public eyes completely. She refuses interviews, applause, explanations. Her silence speaks louder than words ever could. Jack stays by her side, sharing the weight. He writes again, but words come slowly. Every sentence feels inadequate. The city repairs its wounds quickly. Broken streets are fixed, buildings restored. But something invisible remains damaged. Carl attempts to resume his career quietly. Doors close where they once opened eagerly. The spectacle has cost him everything. Anne dreams of jungles and open skies. She wakes to concrete and sirens instead. Sleep becomes an unpredictable visitor. Jack encourages her to leave the city. He believes distance might soften the pain. Anne agrees without hesitation. They travel far from towering buildings. The noise fades into memory gradually. Nature feels safer, though still unfamiliar, and often looks toward the horizon. She imagines Kang free beyond reach. The thought brings both comfort and sorrow. Jack continues writing, inspired by loss. His story becomes a warning, not adventure. He refuses to glorify conquest ever again. Carl reads the script secretly one evening. Each page reflects his own reflection painfully. He closes it unfinished, unable to continue. Time passes, seasons changing quietly. The world moves on, indifferent to memory. But Anne does not forget. She keeps a small token from the island, a reminder of trust broken too late. It never leaves her possession. Jack asks her once about forgiveness, and answers with silence and tears. Some wounds resist healing. In the distance, the ocean remains endless. Waves crash without knowledge of tragedy. Skull Island remains untouched by consequence. Nature continues its cycle uninterrupted. Creatures roam freely, where Kang once ruled. The island remembers him without monuments. Anne wonders if Kong truly died, or if something greater returned to the earth. The question brings quiet peace. Jack finishes the final chapter at dawn. He sets down the pen carefully. The story feels complete, though unresolved. They watch the sunrise together. Light spreads slowly across open land. Hope feels fragile but present. Anne breathes deeply, feeling air without fear. She whispers goodbye to someone unseen. The world listens without reply. Far away, steel towers glimmer again. Life resumes its careless rhythm. But one story remains etched forever. Not of a beast destroyed, but of innocence misunderstood. And a bond the world was not ready for. The icy air of New York presses against Kong's massive form as he stands restrained beneath harsh electric lights. His breathing slow but heavy with confusion rather than rage. Anne watches from a distance with visible conflict in her eyes, understanding that the city sees a monster where she has seen loneliness, emotion, and a quiet intelligence shaped by isolation. Carl Denham moves through the bustling preparations with restless ambition, convinced that control and spectacle justify the cost of bringing something ancient into a world that does not understand it. Chains tighten around Kong's wrists as technicians secure the stage, their movements hurried and careless, treating the giant creature as a prop rather than a living being pulled from its home. The noise of the theater grows louder with each passing moment, echoing through Kong's senses as unfamiliar flashes and metallic sounds disrupt his instinctive awareness of danger. Anne turns away briefly, unable to watch the final preparations, knowing that this display is not triumph but the beginning of a tragic misunderstanding. As the curtain rises, the audience gasps in awe and fear, their reactions feeding Carl's pride while drowning out any lingering doubt he might have once felt. Kang stands motionless under the blinding lights, confused by the restraints and the artificial environment, his instincts struggling against the unnatural stillness forced upon him. Anne's absence from the stage does not go unnoticed by Kong, and her replacement only deepens his agitation as recognition gives way to instinctive rejection. Camera flashes erupt without warning, mimicking bursts of fire and lightning, triggering Kong's survival instincts in a place where there is no jungle to retreat into. The crowd's excitement transforms into panic as Kong's confusion becomes resistance, his strength overpowering the restraints that were never meant to hold the force of nature. Steel bends and chains snap as the illusion of control collapses, revealing the fragile arrogance behind the spectacle Carl created. Kong breaks free with a roar that shakes the theater's foundations, not driven by malice but by fear and disorientation within an alien world. People scatter in all directions as the creature moves through the collapsing stage, searching instinctively for the one presence that brought him comfort amid chaos. Carl stands frozen for a moment, confronted with the consequences of his ambition, before survival instinct forces him to flee with the rest of the crowd. Outside, the streets of New York become a maze of noise and movement as Kang steps into open space, filled with lights, vehicles, and screaming civilians. Every unfamiliar sound sharpens his agitation, each passing car and siren reinforcing his isolation in a world that responds to fear with aggression, and emerges through the chaos, calling out to Kang with desperation, knowing that calm is the only language he understands now. Kong's movements slow when he hears her voice, recognition cutting through panic as he turns toward her with a mixture of relief and urgency. Their reunion is brief but powerful, enough to ground Kong's instincts and focus his actions on protecting the one connection he still recognizes. Military forces begin mobilizing nearby, interpreting Kong's presence as an immediate threat, rather than a displaced being reacting to captivity. As soldiers advance, Kong shields Anne instinctively, his massive frame positioned between her and the approaching danger. Gunfire erupts, striking Kong's body with painful precision, each impact reinforcing his understanding that this world responds only with violence. Anne pleads for restraint, her voice drowned out by orders and weapons as fear overrides empathy. Kang retreats through the city, within his grasp, navigating towering structures that mimic the cliffs and trees of his island home. Buildings crumble beneath his weight as he climbs higher, driven by instinct to seek elevation and distance from pursuit. The city responds with escalating force, its structures never designed to withstand something born from a world untouched by modern boundaries. Helicopters and planes circle overhead, their engines echoing like predatory cries as Kong reaches the towering peak of the Empire State Building. At the summit, the wind howls around him, offering a brief illusion of freedom as he stands above the city that refuses to understand him. Anne clings to him in silence, aware that escape is no longer possible, only survival in fleeting moments. Kang surveys the city below with quiet awareness, no longer fighting but enduring, his strength slowly giving way to exhaustion and wounds. The approaching aircraft close in, their weapons trained with precision as orders are carried out without hesitation. Anne's voice breaks as she realizes the inevitability of what is coming. Her connection to Kang, powerless against calculated destruction. Gunfire tears through the air as planes attack, each strike weakening Kong's grip on both the building and the life he has struggled to protect. Despite his wounds, Kong fights back instinctively, swatting at the machines that surround him like relentless insects. The city watches from below, frozen in collective disbelief, as power and vulnerability collide at impossible heights. One by one, the aircraft retreat or fall, but Kong's strength fades with each passing moment, his massive form trembling under sustained assault. Anne begs him to let go, her tears lost to the wind as she understands that survival for her means surrender for him. Kang looks at her one final time, recognition and acceptance crossing his expression as instinct yields to something resembling understanding. A final barrage strikes true, and Kong's grip loosens as his body succumbs to wounds that no creature should have endured. He falls from the tower in slow, devastating silence. His descent, marking the end of a journey forced upon him by human ambition. Anne screams as the distance grows, her connection severed by gravity and consequence. Kong's body strikes the street below with immense finality, the impact echoing through the city like a closing chapter written in destruction. Crowds gather at a distance, their fear replaced by stunned silence as they witness the result of misunderstanding and exploitation. Anne descends slowly, her grief visible as she approaches the fallen figure that once represented both danger and companionship. Military personnel secured the area while civilians whisper theories and judgments, none fully grasping the weight of what has been lost. Carl reappears through the crowd, his expression hollow as he faces the outcome of choices driven by obsession rather than respect. He stands before Kong's lifeless body, finally acknowledging the cost of turning wonder into spectacle. Anne kneels beside Kong, placing her hand gently against his still form, mourning not a monster but a being displaced from his world. The city remains silent, its towering structures bearing witness to the truth that dominance does not equal understanding. As dawn approaches, the streets hold the memory of a story that should never have ended this way, shaped by beauty, fear, and irreversible consequence. The city begins to stir again as night fades, but the silence around Kong's fallen body remains heavy, pressing on everyone who stands nearby. Morning light reveals the damage left behind, shattered streets and broken structures reflecting the cost of fear and force. Anne stays close, refusing to step away, her presence quiet, yet defiant against the attempts to move her aside. Authorities secure the area methodically, their movements careful now, as if acknowledging too late that restraint might have mattered earlier. Cameras roll from a distance, capturing the aftermath rather than the truth of how ambition and misunderstanding shape the outcome. Carl watches in silence, no longer directing, no longer in control, reduced to an observer of consequences he cannot undo. Anne's gaze remains fixed on Kong's face, searching for meaning where life once existed. She remembers the island winds, the quiet moments when fear softened into trust, moments no one else was meant to witness. Those memories clash with the noise of the city, amplifying her sense of loss. Workers begin preparing equipment to transport Kong's body, treating the task with professional detachment. Each movement feels invasive, reopening wounds that the night has barely allowed to settle. Anne steps back only when she realizes staying will not protect him anymore. As Kang is lifted, the crowd murmurs, unsure whether they are witnessing victory or tragedy. Some see proof of humanity's dominance, others sense something irretrievably lost. The city does not speak with one voice, but confusion hangs equally over every face. Anne walks away slowly, her steps unsteady as exhaustion and grief finally surface. Jack follows at a distance, offering silent support without words that could never be enough. Their shared understanding carries the weight of something sacred, violated beyond repair. News spreads quickly, reshaping the narrative before truth has a chance to settle. Headlines reduce Kang to spectacle once more, stripping away the complexity of what he was. Carl hears his own words echoed back to him, distorted into slogans he no longer believes. In quiet moments, Carl reflects on Skull Island, the place he once saw as opportunity. He remembers the warnings ignored, the risks dismissed for the sake of capturing wonder. Regret settles heavily, replacing ambition with something far more uncomfortable. Anne returns to her small apartment, the familiar space feeling foreign after everything she has seen. The city noise seeps through the walls, a constant reminder that life continues regardless of loss. She struggles to reconcile how something so immense could disappear so quickly. Sleep eludes her as memories surface without order, fragments of laughter, fear, and stillness. Kong's eyes appear in her thoughts, not threatening, but searching. Those moments challenge everything she believed about strength and vulnerability. Jack attempts to help by grounding her in the present, encouraging distance from the chaos. Yet both understand that moving on does not mean forgetting. The island, the journey, and Kang himself are now part of who they are. Elsewhere, scientists debate Kong's existence, analyzing remains with detached curiosity. The creature becomes data, measurements, and theories stripped of context. What Kong represented emotionally is lost beneath calculations and reports, and avoids public attention, declining interviews, and offers that feel hollow. She refuses to let Kong's story be rewritten entirely by those who never knew him. Her silence becomes a quiet act of resistance against exploitation. Carl retreats from the spotlight, burdened by responsibility he can no longer deny. His career, once defined by risk and spectacle, now feels meaningless. The cost of chasing greatness without respect weighs heavier than any failure. In the weeks that follow, the city repairs itself, masking scars with construction and routine. People adapt quickly, choosing familiarity over reflection. Only a few pause long enough to consider what the event revealed about themselves. Anne visits the harbor, watching ships come and go as she remembers the voyage that changed everything. The ocean feels vast and indifferent, yet honest in a way the city never was. She wonders if Skull Island remains untouched, waiting silently beyond human reach. Jack shares her concern, acknowledging that some places should remain unclaimed. They speak cautiously about the future, shaped now by awareness rather than ambition. Their bond deepens through shared understanding rather than romantic certainty. Time moves forward, but the echo of Kong's presence refuses to fade from the city's memory. Even as streets are repaired and routines return, something unseen feels permanently altered. Anne senses it whenever she walks past tall buildings that once felt ordinary. She resumes her stage work slowly, the applause sounding distant compared to past performances. Every role now feels smaller after witnessing something so raw and powerful. Her expressions carry depth the audience cannot fully understand. Jack encourages her to write, believing words might capture what images fail to hold. He watches as she struggles, torn between truth and the fear of being misunderstood. Some experiences resist being shaped into neat stories. Carl remains isolated, sorting through old footage he can barely watch. Frames of Skull Island remind him how easily wonder turns into possession. Each reel feels like a confession without absolution. Rumors surface about expeditions seeking to rediscover the island. Greed disguises itself as curiosity, repeating the same dangerous cycle. Anne feels anger rise, protective of a place she no longer knows. She speaks quietly to Jack about responsibility, about knowing when to stop. Their conversations grow heavier, shaped by lessons learned too late. Both understand that curiosity without respect invites destruction. The city's fascination shifts to the next spectacle, attention easily redirected. Kang becomes a story told in fragments, losing truth with each retelling. Only those who stood close remember the silence between his breaths. Anne avoids those discussions, choosing solitude over shallow remembrance. She walks often, grounding herself in ordinary moments of life. Each step affirms that survival carries its own burden. Jack observes how she changes, stronger yet more reserved. He respects her boundaries, offering presence instead of solutions. Their connection matures into something steady and unspoken. Scientists finalize reports, sealing Kong's fate within academic language. The creature becomes a case study, detached from emotion. Anne reads one article and sets it aside, unable to accept its emptiness. Carl finally leaves the city, abandoning unfinished projects behind. His departure goes unnoticed by most, a quiet exit from ambition. He carries lessons that no success could erase. Anne visits a small theater, watching young performers chase dreams she once shared. Their excitement feels fragile, untouched by consequence. She hopes they never learn through loss alone. Jack joins her, sensing her reflections without needing explanation. They share silence, understanding that some truths require no dialogue. The moment feels complete in its simplicity. Kong's legacy lives differently for each of them. For some, a fallen giant; for others, a warning; for a reminder of connection beyond fear. As seasons change, the city absorbs the past into memory. Buildings rise, shadows stretch, and life continues its rhythm. Yet somewhere between steel and sky, Kong's story lingers quietly, and accepts that remembering does not mean reliving. She allows herself to move forward without denial. The balance feels delicate, but necessary. Jack looks toward the future with cautious hope. Together they choose paths guided by respect rather than conquest. The world feels vast again, not as something to own, but to understand. The mist over Skull Island thickened as dawn crept in, turning the jungle into a breathing, shifting shadow. Anne Darrow stood near the ruined camp, listening to the distant calls of creatures she could not name. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the ground trembled softly, and she knew without seeing him that Kang was awake. Kong moved through the forest with heavy, deliberate steps, every footfall bending roots and crushing stone. The wounds from the night before had slowed him, but his posture remained proud, unbroken by pain or fear. Each sound in the jungle reached him like a warning, reminding him that outsiders had disturbed his world again. The men from the expedition regrouped silently, fear etched into their faces as they counted dwindling supplies. Jack Driscoll scanned the jungle constantly, torn between terror and awe at the power that ruled this land. They had come seeking spectacle and discovery, yet now survival was the only thing left that mattered. Anne felt the strange pull again, the same invisible thread that had tied her fate to Kang from the beginning. She stepped away from the others without speaking, her feet moving as if guided by instinct rather than thought. The jungle parted slowly, and Kang emerged, towering yet still, his eyes fixed on her with cautious recognition. For a long moment, neither moved. The jungle itself seemed to hold its breath, insects silenced by the tension between human and beast. Anne raised her hand slowly, not as a command, but as a gesture of trust she did not fully understand. Kang's massive hand hovered inches above the ground, muscles coiled, ready for violence or retreat. But instead of rage, there was hesitation, something almost curious beneath his ancient instincts. He lowered himself slightly, the earth shaking less, with his movements now, as if he chose restraint. Behind them, the expedition members watched in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. This was not the savage monster they had imagined, not the uncontrollable force they planned to capture. This was a ruler defending his land, reacting to intrusion, not driven by mindless destruction. A distant roar shattered the fragile calm, sharp and predatory, echoing through the cliffs. Kang's head snapped toward the sound, his body instantly tense, dominance replacing hesitation. He turned back to Anne only briefly, a warning in his eyes, before charging toward the threat. The ground quaked violently as Kang disappeared into the trees, branches snapping like twigs. Anne staggered back toward the camp, fear rushing in now that his presence was gone. Jack grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety as another roar echoed, closer than before. From the jungle emerged a massive creature, reptilian and armored, eyes burning with hunger. Its claws tore into the earth as it advanced, testing the air with a guttural hiss. The men opened fire instinctively, bullets useless against scales hardened by centuries of survival. Kang returned with thunderous force, slamming into the beast with primal fury. Their collision shook the cliffs, trees collapsing as ancient rivals clashed for dominance. Kang's roar tore through the air, raw and defiant, echoing across the island like a challenge to fate itself. The battle was brutal and relentless, neither creature yielding ground easily. Claws met fists, teeth snapped inches from flesh, blood darkened the earth beneath them. Kang fought not only to survive, but to protect what was his, the land and the fragile human, watching from afar. Anne screamed his name without thinking, her voice cutting through the chaos. For a split second, Kang glanced toward her, distraction costing him as the beast struck hard. Rage exploded within him, and he responded with overwhelming strength, driving the creature back. With a final, earth-splitting blow, Kang ended the fight, the jungle falling silent once more. He stood breathing heavily, chest rising and falling as blood and rain mixed on his fur. Victory came at a cost, his wounds deeper now, exhaustion etched into every movement. The expedition realized the truth they had been avoiding since their arrival. This island was not theirs to conquer, and Kang was not theirs to claim. Yet greed and ambition whispered louder than reason, already shaping their next move. As Kang retreated toward the cliffs, Anne followed at a distance, refusing to abandon him again. She understood now that what bound them was not captivity or control, but recognition. Two beings from different worlds, both trapped by forces seeking to exploit them. High above the jungle, the sun finally broke through the clouds, illuminating the island in harsh light. Kang paused at the edge of his territory, staring out toward the endless ocean beyond. He sensed change approaching, something darker than any predator Skull Island had ever known. The humans would not leave quietly. And Kang, wounded but unbroken, would not surrender his world without a fight. Night fell over Skull Island with unsettling speed, the jungle swallowing the last traces of daylight. The air grew heavier, thick with moisture and unseen movement, every shadow seeming alive. Anne stayed close to the cliffs, her eyes searching the darkness for any sign of Kang. Kang rested among the stone formations above the jungle floor, his massive frame half hidden by rock. Pain pulsed through his body with every breath, reminders of battles that never truly ended. Yet even wounded, his senses remained sharp, alert to danger creeping through his domain. Below, the expedition worked quietly, their campfires masked to avoid drawing attention. Greed and fear argued silently in their minds, but neither could overpower ambition. They whispered plans of capture, of ships in chains, of taking the island's greatest prize. Jack Driscoll watched them with growing unease, knowing the path they chose led only to disaster. He glanced toward Anne repeatedly, aware she felt the same dread settling into her chest. Both understood now that Kang was not the enemy this journey had created. Anne slipped away again, drawn by instinct rather than logic. climbing the rocky path carefully. Loose stones shifted under her feet, echoing softly into the jungle below. She froze each time, afraid the sound would summon something far worse than Kong. At the summit, she found him watching the ocean, moonlight outlining his immense silhouette, the endless water reflected in his eyes, a vast unknown filled with distant threats. Anne stopped several steps away, unsure if her presence would bring comfort or attention. Kong sensed her instantly, turning his head without surprise. He studied her carefully, as if weighing her place in his world once more. Instead of retreating, he allowed her to remain, his posture calm but guarded. The wind carried unfamiliar scents from the sea, sharp and metallic. Kang growled low in his chest, recognizing the smell of approaching ships. His world was being hunted, not by beasts, but by men who refused to understand it. Far below, engines roared faintly in the distance, masked by crashing waves. The expedition's rescue ship had returned, bringing with it opportunity and betrayal. The crew prepared weapons and restraints, convinced control was within reach. Anne felt the tension shift, a heaviness pressing against her chest. She followed Kong's gaze toward the horizon, realizing the danger was not behind them. This was only the beginning of something far more destructive. Kang moved suddenly, rising to his full height, muscles flexing despite his injuries. He beat his chest once, a thunderous warning that echoed across the cliffs. The sound rolled over the jungle like a declaration of war. Creatures scattered below, instinctively fleeing the call of their ruler. Even predators knew better than to challenge him now. But humans, driven by obsession, interpreted the sound as an invitation. Searchlights pierced the darkness from the shoreline, cutting through trees and mist. The beams swept the jungle methodically, inching closer to Kong's territory. Anne stepped back instinctively, fear overtaking trust in that moment. Kang glanced at her again, his expression unreadable. There was urgency in his movements now, not panic, but preparation. He guided her toward a sheltered passage between the rocks, shielding her from view. Down below, gunshots cracked through the night as the crew tested their weapons. The sound echoed unnaturally, foreign and aggressive. Kong's hands clenched into fists, rage simmering beneath his restraint. Anne realized the truth with crushing clarity. They were not here to leave the island. They were here to take him. Kang descended rapidly, ignoring pain as he moved through the jungle with purpose. Trees fell in his path, the earth trembling beneath his weight. Anne followed as best she could, staying hidden while chaos erupted below. The expedition was unprepared for the force that met them. Kang burst from the trees, roaring with fury that shook the shoreline. Men scattered in terror, plans collapsing under the reality of what they faced. Bullets struck his chest and arms, sparks of pain igniting his fury. He pushed forward regardless, driven by instinct older than memory. This was his land, and no chain would ever claim him willingly. Anne watched helplessly as nets were fired, tangling around Kong's limbs. The ropes tightened, weighted, and reinforced, pulling him down inch by inch. His roar turned desperate, the sound of a king refusing submission. Jack shouted for them to stop, his voice drowned by engines and gunfire. No one listened. The capture had begun. Kang fought violently, ripping free of restraints, hurling men aside with terrifying ease. But exhaustion weakened him, each movement slower than the last. The island itself seemed to mourn as he finally fell to one knee. Anne ran forward despite the danger, screaming his name. Kang looked at her, eyes filled not with rage, but betrayal and confusion. The moment cut deeper than any wound. A final blast of gas engulfed him, thick and suffocating. His strength failed, muscles trembling as darkness claimed him. The jungle fell eerily silent as Kang collapsed completely. The men stood frozen, stunned by what they had done. Victory felt hollow, tainted by the cost of their ambition. Chains were secured, plans executed, while guilt lingered unspoken. Anne knelt beside Kong's massive form, tears streaming freely. She placed her hand against his fur, feeling the slow rhythm of his breathing. He was alive, but his world was slipping away. As dawn approached, ships prepared to depart. Skull Island faded behind them, shrouded in mist and loss. Kong was loaded aboard, unconscious, bound for a world that did not deserve him. Anne remained on deck, staring back at the shrinking island. She knew nothing would ever be the same again. Neither for her, nor for the giant who had trusted her. Kang stood frozen for a moment amid the shattered entrance of the exhibition hall, his massive form silhouetted against the city lights that burned like artificial stars. The noise overwhelmed him completely, horns blaring, sirens screaming, and human voices blending into a chaotic roar that felt hostile and threatening. His chest heaved as instinct told him this place was dangerous, alien, and built to cage or destroy him. People ran in every direction, their fear spreading faster than fire through dry grass. Cars crashed into one another as drivers abandoned control in blind panic. Glass shattered from nearby buildings as Kong took his first unsteady step forward. Each movement sent tremors through the ground beneath him, cracking pavement and buckling steel. He reached out instinctively, touching the side of a building as though searching for something familiar. The cold surface offered no comfort, only confusion and rage. Police lines formed hastily at the far end of the street, weapons raised with shaking hands. Orders were shouted but barely heard over the noise of destruction. Kang turned toward the movement, eyes narrowing as flashing lights reflected wildly across his face. A warning shot echoed through the air, striking the pavement near his feet. The sharp sound startled him, triggering fear rather than submission. He roared in response, a thunderous sound that rattled windows blocks away. Anne pushed through the crowd desperately, ignoring hands that tried to pull her back. Her heart pounded as she called his name again and again, praying he could hear her through the chaos. She finally reached the open street, just as Kong lifted a crushed vehicle from his path. For a brief moment, Kong saw her standing there, small and terrified, yet familiar. His movements slowed as recognition broke through his panic. He lowered the vehicle and took a hesitant step toward her. That moment of fragile connection shattered as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Bullets struck his chest and arms, stinging like swarms of insects. Pain replaced confusion, and fear twisted instantly into fury. Kang roared again, this time in pure anger, and slammed his fists into the street. The ground split apart, sending debris flying toward the police line. Men scattered as the force knocked vehicles aside like toys. Anne screamed for them to stop, her voice hoarse and desperate. No one listened, trapped in fear and duty. Kong turned away from her, instinct screaming at him to escape. He began moving deeper into the city, each step tearing through obstacles that stood in his way. Streetlights bent and snapped beneath his hands as he struggled to maintain balance. The towering structures around him felt like enemies closing in. Military units mobilized quickly, coordinating through crackling radios. Searchlights tracked Kong's movements from rooftops and helicopters. The city transformed into a battlefield within minutes. Kong paused at the edge of a wide avenue, staring upward at the towering skyline. The vertical maze of steel and glass confused him, unlike the cliffs of his island home. He sensed danger above as much as around him. Anne followed as closely as she could, her lungs burning with every step. She called to him again, begging him not to run, not to fight. Her words were lost beneath the thunder of approaching machines. Helicopters appeared overhead, circling cautiously like predators. Their blades sliced through the air with an unfamiliar menace. Kong looked up, eyes narrowing as light swept across his face. The first attack came suddenly, explosions tearing through the air near his shoulders. Fire and smoke surrounded him as missiles detonated against nearby buildings. Kong staggered, roaring in pain as fragments tore into his skin. He swung wildly at the air, striking nothing but smoke and noise. His frustration mounted as the attacks continued relentlessly. Every instinct screamed at him to climb, to escape upward. Kang reached for the nearest skyscraper, gripping its steel frame with massive hands. The structure groaned as he pulled himself upward, tearing chunks of metal free. People screamed below as debris rained down into the streets. The city watched in horror as Kang began his ascent, defying everything they believed possible. Helicopters adjusted position, maintaining distance while continuing their assault. Gunfire echoed endlessly, bouncing between towering walls, and arrived at the base of the building just as Kang climbed higher. She watched helplessly, knowing she could no longer reach him. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered his name again. Kong climbed with determination born of survival, not aggression. Each handhold felt precarious as the building shuddered under his weight. His muscles burned, weakened from captivity and gas exposure. Above him, the sky seemed closer, darker, and colder. The noise below faded slightly as height separated him from the chaos. For a fleeting moment, he felt almost free. That illusion shattered as aircraft closed in once more. Searchlights blinded him, stripping away any sense of safety. Missiles streaked past him, detonating against the building's sides. Explosions tore chunks from the structure, sending shockwaves through his body. Kong clung desperately, roaring in defiance and pain. Smoke filled the air, choking and disorienting him further. Below, Anne stood frozen, unable to look away. She felt the helpless certainty that this climb was leading somewhere final. The crowd around her watched in silence, awe replacing fear. Kong reached a narrow ledge near the top, pausing to catch his breath. The wind whipped around him, colder and stronger than anything he had known. He looked out over the city, eyes reflecting countless lights stretching endlessly. For the first time, the enormity of his captivity truly settled in. There was no jungle waiting beyond this horizon, no familiar land to return to. Only stone, steel, and enemies. The aircraft regrouped, preparing for a final assault. Orders were issued without hesitation or mercy. The mission had become clear. Kong could not be allowed to survive. Anne screamed upward, her voice breaking as she begged them to stop. Her words dissolved into the night, unheard by those in control. Kang looked down once more, finding her among the distant figures. Their eyes met across an impossible distance. Something passed between them, understanding mixed with sorrow. Kang let out a softer sound, this time almost mournful. The attack resumed with devastating force. Bullets tore into his body, each impact stealing strength and resolve. His grip faltered as pain overwhelmed him. Kang roared defiantly, striking at the aircraft with fading power. One helicopter spiraled away in flames, crashing into the darkness below. The victory was brief and hollow. More aircraft replaced it instantly, relentless and unforgiving. Kong's movements slowed as exhaustion and wounds took their toll. Blood stained the steel beneath his hands. Anne collapsed to her knees, sobbing openly now. She knew this was the end, no matter how fiercely he fought. The city stood witness to its own cruelty. Kong sank back against the structure, chest heaving violently. He looked toward the sky one last time, eyes filled with pain rather than rage. The sound he made then was quiet, almost resigned. The aircraft closed in for the final strike. Weapons locked, lights focused, orders executed. The night held its breath. Kang stood frozen for a moment amid the shattered entrance of the exhibition hall, his massive form silhouetted against the city lights that burned like artificial stars. The noise overwhelmed him completely, horns blaring, sirens screaming, and human voices blending into a chaotic roar that felt hostile and threatening. His chest heaved as instinct told him this place was dangerous, alien, and built to cage or destroy him. People ran in every direction, their fear spreading faster than fire through dry grass. Cars crashed into one another as drivers abandoned control in blind panic. Glass shattered from nearby buildings as Kong took his first unsteady step forward. Each movement sent tremors through the ground beneath him, cracking pavement and buckling steel. He reached out instinctively, touching the side of a building as though searching for something familiar. The cold surface offered no comfort, only confusion and rage. Police lines formed hastily at the far end of the street, weapons raised with shaking hands. Orders were shouted but barely heard over the noise of destruction. Kang turned toward the movement, eyes narrowing as flashing lights reflected wildly across his face. A warning shot echoed through the air, striking the pavement near his feet. The sharp sounds startled him, triggering fear rather than submission. He roared in response, a thunderous sound that rattled windows blocks away. Anne pushed through the crowd desperately, ignoring hands that tried to pull her back. Her heart pounded as she called his name again and again, praying he could hear her through the chaos. She finally reached the open street, just as Kong lifted a crushed vehicle from his path. For a brief moment, Kong saw her standing there, small and terrified, yet familiar. His movements slowed as recognition broke through his panic. He lowered the vehicle and took a hesitant step toward her. That moment of fragile connection shattered as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Bullets struck his chest and arms, stinging like swarms of insects. Pain replaced confusion, and fear twisted instantly into fury. Kang roared again, this time in pure anger, and slammed his fists into the street. The ground split apart, sending debris flying toward the police line. Men scattered as the force knocked vehicles aside like toys. Anne screamed for them to stop, her voice hoarse and desperate. No one listened, trapped in fear and duty. Kong turned away from her, instinct screaming at him to escape. He began moving deeper into the city, each step tearing through obstacles that stood in his way. Streetlights bent and snapped beneath his hands as he struggled to maintain balance. The towering structures around him felt like enemies closing in. Military units mobilized quickly, coordinating through crackling radios. Searchlights tracked Kong's movements from rooftops and helicopters. The city transformed into a battlefield within minutes. Kong paused at the edge of a wide avenue, staring upward at the towering skyline. The vertical maze of steel and glass confused him, unlike the cliffs of his island home. He sensed danger above as much as around him. Anne followed as closely as she could, her lungs burning with every step. She called to him again, begging him not to run, not to fight. Her words were lost beneath the thunder of approaching machines. Helicopters appeared overhead, circling cautiously like predators. Their blades sliced through the air with an unfamiliar menace. Kong looked up, eyes narrowing as light swept across his face. The first attack came suddenly, explosions tearing through the air near his shoulders. Fire and smoke surrounded him as missiles detonated against nearby buildings. Kong staggered, roaring in pain as fragments tore into his skin. He swung wildly at the air, striking nothing but smoke and noise. His frustration mounted as the attacks continued relentlessly. Every instinct screamed at him to climb, to escape upward. Kang reached for the nearest skyscraper, gripping its steel frame with massive hands. The structure groaned as he pulled himself upward, tearing chunks of metal free. People screamed below as debris rained down into the streets. The city watched in horror as Kang began his ascent, defying everything they believed possible. Helicopters adjusted position, maintaining distance while continuing their assault. Gunfire echoed endlessly, bouncing between towering walls, and arrived at the base of the building just as Kang climbed higher. She watched helplessly, knowing she could no longer reach him. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered his name again. Kong climbed with determination born of survival, not aggression. Each handhold felt precarious as the building shuddered under his weight. His muscles burned, weakened from captivity and gas exposure. Above him, the sky seemed closer, darker, and colder. The noise below faded slightly as height separated him from the chaos. For a fleeting moment, he felt almost free. That illusion shattered as aircraft closed in once more. Searchlights blinded him, stripping away any sense of safety. Missiles streaked past him, detonating against the building's sides. Explosions tore chunks from the structure, sending shockwaves through his body. Kong clung desperately, roaring in defiance and pain. Smoke filled the air, choking and disorienting him further below. Anne stood frozen, unable to look away. She felt the helpless certainty that this climb was leading somewhere final. The crowd around her watched in silence, awe replacing fear. Kang reached a narrow ledge near the top, pausing to catch his breath. The wind whipped around him, colder and stronger than anything he had known. He looked out over the city, eyes reflecting countless lights, stretching endlessly. For the first time, the enormity of his captivity truly settled in. There was no jungle waiting beyond this horizon, no familiar land to return to, only stone, steel, and enemies. The aircraft regrouped, preparing for a final assault. Orders were issued without hesitation or mercy. The mission had become clear. Kong could not be allowed to survive. Anne screamed upward, her voice breaking as she begged them to stop. Her words dissolved into the night, unheard by those in control. Kang looked down once more, finding her among the distant figures. Their eyes met across an impossible distance. Something passed between them, understanding mixed with sorrow. Kang let out a softer sound, this time, almost mournful. The attack resumed with devastating force. Bullets tore into his body, each impact stealing strength and resolve. His grip faltered as pain overwhelmed him. Kang roared defiantly, striking at the aircraft with fading power. One helicopter spiraled away in flames, crashing into the darkness below. The victory was brief and hollow. More aircraft replaced it instantly, relentless and unforgiving. Kong's movements slowed as exhaustion and wounds took their toll. Blood stained the steel beneath his hands, and collapsed to her knees, sobbing openly now. She knew this was the end. No matter how fiercely he fought, the city stood witness to its own cruelty. Kong sank back against the structure, chest heaving violently. He looked toward the sky one last time, eyes filled with pain rather than rage. The sound he made then was quiet, almost resigned. The aircraft closed in for the final strike. Weapons locked, lights focused, orders executed. The night held its breath. The Venture cut through the Pacific with a steady rhythm, its engines humming like a tired heartbeat. Salt air clung to the deck, mixing with a lingering scent of fear and adventure left behind on the island. Skull Island was gone from sight, but its presence remained alive inside every soul aboard the ship. Carl Denham paced near the bow, his coat fluttering as his mind refused to rest. The images replayed endlessly. Kong standing against the jungle sky, like a forgotten god. Carl knew then that what he had witnessed was not just spectacle, but something the world would demand to see. Anne Darrow sat quietly, wrapped in a blanket, though the air was warm and forgiving. Her eyes stared outward, yet her thoughts remained deep within the jungle's shadowed heart. She remembered Kang not as a monster, but as a lonely guardian bound to a dying world. Jack Driscoll leaned against the railing beside her, offering presence rather than questions. He sensed that words would only fracture what little peace Anne still possessed. Some bonds, he realized, form beyond language and survive beyond explanation. Below deck, the crew spoke in hushed tones, avoiding eye contact and laughter alike. Every empty bunk reminded them of someone who would never return home. Survival felt less like victory and more like a burden carried in silence. Carl gathered the remaining film reels, treating them like sacred artifacts. Each frame represented proof that Skull Island existed beyond rumor and madness. In those reels lived the power to change his fate and define his legacy forever. As days passed, the sea calmed, but tension aboard the Venture did not fade. Anne grew restless at night, waking from dreams filled with towering silhouettes and sorrowful eyes. Kong's gaze haunted her, not with threat, but with unspoken understanding and loss. Jack noticed how Anne flinched at sudden noises, how her laughter no longer came easily. He wished he could pull her back into the simplicity of the world they once shared. Yet part of him knew that innocence, once lost, never truly returns unchanged. Carl spoke often of New York, of theaters, crowds, and roaring applause. His voice carried excitement, but beneath it lay something darker and more desperate. He no longer saw Kang as a being, only as destiny chained to ambition. The crew listened without protest, though unease spread through their expressions. They remembered Kong's strength, his fury, and the strange sadness behind his violence. No one dared question what capturing such a creature might truly cost him. Finally confronted Carl one evening as the sun sank into the ocean. She spoke of Kong's pain, of his isolation, and of the harm yet to come. Carl smiled gently, dismissing her fears as sentiment clouding opportunity. Jack stepped in, his voice firm but controlled, warning Carl of consequences. He reminded him that not everything discovered needs to be owned or displayed. Carl only turned away, already lost to visions of glory and redemption. Night after night, the Venture pushed onward, drawing closer to civilization. With each mile traveled, the distance between humanity and nature seemed to widen. Skull Island felt like a dream fading under the harsh light of reality. Anne stood alone on deck during a quiet dawn, watching birds circle above. She wondered whether Kong sensed her absence, whether he waited for her return. The thought tightened her chest with guilt she could not escape. Jack joined her, offering silent comfort as the horizon brightened. He promised her safety, though he himself was unsure of what awaited them. Both understood that the world ahead would not welcome what followed them home. Carl announced landfall with renewed energy, his confidence infecting no one. The city loomed ahead like a towering beast of steel and smoke. Unseen, yet inevitable, New York waited to awaken what should have remained asleep. As the Venture approached port, Anne felt a chill despite the rising sun. She sensed that Skull Island was not the end, but only the beginning. Somewhere beyond the ocean, Kong's fate was already moving toward collision. New York Harbor unfolded beneath a gray sky, its skyline rising like an iron forest. Steamships passed slowly, unaware of the living legend hidden below deck. The city pulsed with noise and hunger, ready to consume anything extraordinary. Carl stood tall as the Venture docked, his confidence sharpened by concrete dreams. He imagined headlines, ticket lines, and his name etched into history. To him, Kong was no longer a creature, but an answer to every failure. Anne watched the city with unease, its towering buildings pressing against her thoughts. Skull Island had been wild and cruel, yet strangely honest in its danger. This place felt colder, masked behind progress and applause. Jack sensed the shift the moment they stepped onto the dock. People moved fast, eyes forward, hearts armored by routine and ambition. He wondered how a being like Kong could ever survive here. Crates were unloaded under Carl's strict supervision, guarded and sealed tightly. No one outside the crew understood what lay hidden within reinforced steel. The secret traveled silently into the heart of the city. Anne tried to distance herself from the preparations, but guilt followed closely. She replayed memories of Kong's gentleness, his childlike curiosity and trust. Every chain tightened around her conscience, as much as around him. Jack confronted Carl again, questioning the morality behind the spectacle. Carl dismissed him with rehearsed logic and forced optimism. Progress, he insisted, demanded sacrifice, even when the cost felt unbearable. The theater was prepared with grandeur, lights blazing like artificial suns. Posters promised wonder beyond imagination, selling mystery to the masses. No hint of tragedy lingered within the painted smiles. Anne refused to participate, her heart unable to betray Kong again. Another woman stood in her place, nameless and replaceable. Carl assured himself the audience would never know the difference. As opening night approached, tension vibrated through the city air. Even those unaware sensed something monumental nearing the surface. New York thrived on spectacle, but had never faced consequence like this. Kong stirred within his confinement, reacting to unfamiliar sounds and scents. The city roared around him, confusing and relentless. Instinct warned him that this world offered no mercy. Anne felt his unrest from miles away, an ache she could not explain. She wandered the streets, haunted by towering shadows and flashing lights. Each sound reminded her of how far he had been dragged from home. Jack searched for her through crowded avenues, knowing she carried the heaviest burden. He wanted to save her from regret, though he could not undo the past. Some choices, once made, carved permanent scars. Carl finalized every detail, blind to warning signs and whispered doubts. The show would go on, regardless of fear or conscience. To stop now would mean facing his own reflection. Opening night arrived, wrapped in excitement and expectation. Crowds gathered, laughter echoing beneath glowing marquees. No one sensed the storm about to break through illusion behind the curtain. Kong strained against his restraints. Flashbulbs exploded like lightning, triggering panic and confusion. The chains rattled as fear transformed into fury. Anne felt the shift instantly, her chest tightening with dread. She ran toward the theater, knowing instinct outweighed reason. Some bonds pulled harder than fear ever could. Jack followed, pushing through the crowd as chaos began to unfold. Screams replaced applause. In a violent instant, the illusion shattered beneath raw terror. Kong broke free, steel snapping under unimaginable strength. The theater crumbled as the city met something truly alive. Fear surged where wonder had once stood. Carl watched helplessly as his dream burned beyond control. The applause he sought turned into screams and sirens. At last, consequence stood before him, undeniable and unforgiving. Kong burst into the streets. Drawn by instinct and memory, the city screamed back, unprepared for nature's reply. Steel towers loomed as both challenge and refuge, and emerged into the chaos, calling his name without hesitation. For a moment, the world narrowed to a single connection. In that glance, recognition replaced rage. Jack reached her side, shielding her, as destruction surrounded them. He knew the city would never understand what it had awakened. Some legends are born only to be destroyed. Kang lifted Anne gently, escaping upward into the city's heights. Sirens wailed below, as panic spread like wildfire. The chase had begun, and there would be no turning back. High above the streets, Kong paused, watching lights flicker endlessly. This world dazzled, but offered no peace. His fate climbed with him, step by towering step. Anne clung to him, tears lost in rushing wind. She understood now that beauty and cruelty often share the same stage, and the final act was still unfolding. Kong climbed higher through the city, drawn upward by instinct rather than thought. Steel beams and narrow ledges became familiar terrain beneath his massive hands. The night air thinned as the ground fell away beneath him. Anne felt the height press against her chest, fear mixing with awe. The city lights spread like a glowing ocean far below. She held tighter, trusting Kong more than the world beneath them. Sirens echoed endlessly, their cries bouncing between stone canyons. Police lines formed below, weapons raised against the impossible. No one truly knew how to fight a legend. Jack followed through the chaos, refusing to abandon Anne. He pushed past soldiers and frightened civilians alike. Hope, however fragile, kept his feet moving forward. Kong reached the upper levels of the tallest tower, pausing to look around. Wind whipped through his fur, carrying unfamiliar scents and distant thunder. For a moment, the city seemed small and silent. Anne sensed calm within him, a brief escape from terror. She spoke softly, words meant more for comfort than understanding. Her voice grounded him in a world that made no sense. Below them, Carl watched from the shadows, regret etched deep across his face. The dream he chased had turned into a nightmare beyond repair. Fame felt meaningless in the presence of so much loss. The military mobilized with urgency, determination replacing hesitation. Orders were shouted, engines roared to life. The city prepared for a battle it could not truly win. Kong noticed movement in the sky, shapes growing closer. His posture shifted from wonder to alert readiness. Instinct warned him of danger, approaching fast. Anne followed his gaze, spotting aircraft cutting through clouds. Fear surged anew, sharp and undeniable. She knew this moment had always been coming. Jack reached the base of the tower, looking upward helplessly. The height separated him from everything that mattered. All he could do was watch and pray. The first plane roared past, gunfire tearing through the air. Kong reacted instantly, swatting at the threat with raw force. The city trembled with every impact. Anne screamed as bullets tore through stone and steel. Kang shielded her with his body without hesitation. Pain fueled his rage, but protection remained his priority. Another plane fell, spiraling into the streets below. Crowds scattered as fire and debris rained down. The cost of spectacle became brutally clear. Kang roared into the night, a sound filled with fury and sorrow. The city answered with more firepower. Mercy had no place in this confrontation. Anne pressed her forehead against his fur, tears streaming freely. She begged him to run, though there was nowhere left to go. Every path had narrowed to this final stand. Jack watched in horror as the sky burned with gunfire. Each shot felt personal, cutting deeper than distance allowed. He had never felt so powerless. Kong fought on, climbing higher, even as wounds slowed him. His strength remained immense, but exhaustion crept in. The world demanded more than any creature could give. The final planes approached, relentless and precise. Their guns spoke with finality. Even legends bleed. Kong staggered, gripping the tower with fading strength. His breathing grew heavy, labored by pain and effort. The city watched as myth began to fall, and realized the moment before anyone else did. She held his face, memorizing every detail. Love does not need words to be understood. Kang looked at her one last time, eyes filled with trust. In that gaze lived innocence, untouched by cruelty. It was a farewell. Neither wanted. His grip loosened as strength finally failed. The world seemed to hold its breath. Gravity claimed what bullets could not. Kong fell through the night, massive and silent. Time stretched as the city watched history collapse. Legends do not fade quietly. The impact echoed across the streets, shaking buildings and hearts alike. Dust rose like a shroud over the fallen giant. The battle was over, but the cost lingered. Anne screamed as Jack reached her side, holding her upright. The city slowly emerged from shock and silence. No cheers followed, only uneasy stillness. Carl stepped forward through the crowd, eyes fixed on Kong's body. The dream that drove him lay broken at his feet. Nothing could justify what had been taken. Jack wrapped Anne in his arms as dawn began to rise. Light touched the city with false promise. Some scars would never heal. Kang lay still beneath the towering structures, finally at rest. The city stood above him, unchanged yet forever marked. Progress had claimed another victim. Anne whispered goodbye, her voice lost in the wind. Beauty and the Beast had shared a moment beyond judgment. The world simply was not ready for it. The frozen New York night trembles as Kong carries Anne through the roaring streets, his massive footsteps shaking asphalt and glass alike. Sirens scream from every direction, lights flash against towering buildings, and fear spreads as people scatter. Yet Kong's focus never leaves Anne, whom he shields instinctively with one colossal arm. Despite bullets striking his fur and pain burning through his body, his movement is driven not by rage but by protection. As if the city itself has become an enemy threatening the only being who showed him kindness. Jack follows from below, weaving through chaos and destruction, watching helplessly as the creature climbs higher, drawn upward by instinct, toward the tallest point in the city. The Empire State Building rises before Kong like a final refuge, and he begins the ascent, gripping steel and stone, while the wind howls louder with every level. Anne pleads with him to stop, her voice breaking through the noise, but Kong only looks at her with quiet understanding, as though he knows this height is where their journey must slow, not where it must escape. At the summit, Kang places Anne gently on the ledge, the city stretching endlessly beneath them, glowing and indifferent. For a brief moment, there is peace, broken only by the wind and Kong's steady breathing, his eyes scanning the sky as if sensing what is coming. Anne steps closer, resting her hand against his fur. And in that instant, the monster and the woman stand, not as captor and captive, but as two beings connected by shared loneliness. The sound of engines cuts through the silence as military planes circle, their shadows passing over Kong's massive form. He rises to his full height, beating his chest and roaring into the sky, a defiant challenge against forces far greater than himself. As gunfire erupts, Kong swats at the planes, managing to bring several down, each victory brief and costly, his strength fading with every wound he receives. Anne screams for them to stop, tears streaming as she watches Kong weaken, his movements slowing under relentless fire. Jack reaches the top at last, pulling Anne away as Kang staggers, blood staining the steel beneath him. With one final glance at Anne, filled with recognition and quiet acceptance, Kang releases his grip and collapses backward, his immense body falling through the night, toward the city below. The impact echoes through the streets as Kang lies motionless, crowds gathering around the fallen giant, their fear slowly giving way to awe and sorrow. Anne pushes forward, collapsing beside him, her grief raw as she looks into eyes that no longer move. Jack stands behind her, understanding now that what the world called a monster was something far more tragic, something unable to exist within human ambition. Carl Denham arrives, staring at the lifeless form of Kang, his obsession finally stripped of triumph. As people murmur that the planes defeated the beast, Carl speaks softly, his voice heavy with regret, admitting the truth that lingers in the cold air. It was never the machines or the bullets that ended Kong's story, but the beauty and longing that brought him out of his world, and into one that could never accept him.